The U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime.
That they don't know what the they're doing.
President Trump calling Iran's foiled attempt to strike Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar a very weak response.
This was an historically successful attack. We should celebrate it as Americans.
There's been a lot to unpack within these 2 weeks with the Israel-Iran conflict. So it started with Israel launching an attack after Iran refused to come to the table for nuclear talks. Transition to the U.S. launching attacks on Iran's key nuclear facilities with bunker busters. Now, in the aftermath, U.S. bases in the Middle East face retaliation strikes from Iran. A ceasefire has been called, broken, and reestablished, and more information has come to light on the U.S. military's mission. I'm going to take you through everything we know about the U.S.'s strike on Iran and what's come in the aftermath. On July 13th, Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, which came as a surprise for most of the world.
We are following breaking news as we come on the air. Multiple explosions now confirmed as Israel begins its strike in Iran after days of warning. Let's get straight to Jeff Harris at the live desk with what we know now. Jeff.
Breaking tonight, Didi, brand new video shows the strikes Israel says are targeting Iran's nuclear sites and also top military and nuclear scientists. Iranian state television says the head of Iran's paramilitary Revolutionary Guard is dead. New video just in of some of the damage in Tehran. Israel is calling up tens of thousands of soldiers to prepare for Iran's retaliation.
Moments ago, Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, a targeted military operation to roll back the Iranian threat to Israel's very survival. This operation will continue for as many days as it takes to remove this threat.
Live look at the White House tonight, where President Trump is convening a cabinet-level meeting at this time. Secretary of State Marco Rubio with this statement right here, saying the U.S. was not involved in these strikes. Take a look at this map of known U.S. military bases across the Middle East as well. U.S. officials now fear Iran might target some of these bases right here, which could result in a mass casualty event. The U.S. is warning Iran not to.
At this point in time, Israel just wanted Iran's nuclear program gone. So they said Iran's development of a nuclear program had reached the point of no return, and they wanted to prevent a bomb from developing. Like Jeff Harris said, the U.S. clarified that they had nothing to do with Israel's strikes on Iran. When Trump found out about the strikes, he began posting up a storm on Truth Social. And he said Iran should have taken a U.S. nuclear deal when they were given an ultimatum.
We are waking up to a major escalation in the Middle East. A live look right now at Jerusalem after Iran fired dozens of drone strikes. Israeli forces intercepted overnight and continue this morning. Now, this in response to Israel's wave of airstrikes to destroy Tehran's nuclear program. And thanks for joining us. I'm Jan Jeffcoat. It is Friday, June 13th. Israeli defense leaders say the mission to target the nuclear facilities of the largest state sponsor of terrorism was necessary for Israel's very survival. Reports also this morning the country's military chief and the head of Iran's Revolutionary Guard were also killed in the attack. Mark Boyle joining us from the live desk with the latest right now. Mark.
Jan, all in, this appears to be a success for Israel. We are seeing a post right now, the president out saying 2 months ago, I gave Iran a 60-day ultimatum to make a deal. They should have done it. Today is day 61. I told them what to do, but they just couldn't get there. Earlier this morning, he also posted Iran must make a deal before there's nothing left. Also, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowing this will continue as long as necessary.
We struck at the heart of Iran's nuclear weaponization program. We targeted Iran's main enrichment facility in Natanz. We targeted Iran's leading nuclear scientists working on the Iranian bomb. We also struck at the heart of Iran's ballistic missile program. This operation will continue for as many days as it takes to remove this threat.
The IDF says the strikes targeted sites in Iran, including military and nuclear facilities, and new within the past hour. Israel officials say they were able to smuggle drones and other weapons into Iran ahead of these strikes to make this as successful as it was. We're hearing it was a success as dozens of sites were hit there. And this all comes as tensions come to a head over Tehran's rapidly advancing nuclear program. Those strikes also killed several key leaders, including the commander-in-chief of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. There he is, General Hossein Salami, and he was among the country's most powerful figures. and reportedly directly reported to Iran's supreme leader. So they got who they were looking for so far, and more are to come, we're told. Here in Washington, U.S. officials say they're still working on these talks for nuclear conversations with Iran Sunday, but a big question mark now on if that will happen or not, given what happened overnight. New developments as we get them both on air and online anytime at thenationaldesk.com.
Now, at this point, the conflict has been going on for a few days between Israel and Iran, and they're just continually launching missiles back and forth with no end in sight. Kayla Gaskins gives a look at the damage left behind.
The fighting between Israel and Iran intensifying Monday. An Iranian strike killing at least 8 in Israel. An Israeli strike hitting the Iranian state TV studios during a live broadcast. President Trump answering questions about the conflict from reporters at the G7 summit in Canada.
It's painful for both parties, but I'd say Iran is not winning this war. And they should talk, and they should talk immediately before it's too late.
Until now, the U.S. has largely waited in the wings of the conflict, jumping in to help Israel's defense, but refraining from any offense.
What would it take for the U.S. to get involved in this conflict militarily?
I don't want to talk about that.
The U.S. is currently rapidly moving military assets to the Middle East, rerouting an aircraft carrier, bringing the total to 2 now in the region, and deploying dozens of additional aircraft to U.S. bases in Europe. Trump pointing out he's already given Iran 60 days to make a new nuclear deal. Israel, meanwhile, has taken control of the skies over Tehran and is expanding its targets, striking Iran's energy facilities, manufacturing plants, government buildings, and even a regional airport. This shift spurring some analysts to predict Israel's aiming at a full regime change rather than just destroying Iran's nuclear program. Iran says Israel's strikes have already killed more than 200 people. Iran punching back, some of its missiles slipping past Israel's aerial defenses. Iran also says they've shot down 3 Israeli F-35 fighter jets and captured a female pilot. The IDF denies this. On Capitol Hill, lawmakers split on the possibility of the U.S. getting involved militarily. Senator Tim Kaine introducing legislation to prevent President Trump from using military force against Iran without Congress's approval. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins.
Now, while the U.S. hasn't officially jumped in yet, they are waiting in the wings of the Middle East in case they need to jump and assist Israel. The president was constantly asked about the U.S.'s involvement, being an ally of Israel, and he gave a timeline of when we could expect him to make a decision if we'd get involved in this conflict.
Regarding the ongoing situation in Iran, I know there has been a lot of speculation amongst all of you in the media regarding the president's decision-making and whether or not the United States will be directly involved. In light of that news, I have a message directly from the president, and I quote, "Based on the fact that there's a substantial chance of negotiations that may or may not take place with Iran in the near future, I will make my decision whether or not to go within the next 2 weeks." That's a quote directly from the president for all of you today.
What was the thought process behind 2 week timetable? Just a time to see whether or not people come to their senses.
The Iranian foreign minister this afternoon said if the U.S. is serious about negotiations, that you would call up Israel and request that they stop their airstrikes. Will you make that request?
Well, I think it's very hard to make that request right now. If somebody's winning, it's a little bit harder to do than if somebody's losing. But we're ready, willing, and able, and we've been speaking to Iran, and we'll see what happens.
Now, while Trump was trying to propose an end to this conflict, Iran is warning for the U.S. to not get involved in a series of posts on X. In one post, Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei threatened the U.S. And he said, quote, "The harm the U.S. will suffer will definitely be irreparable if they enter this conflict military." We had U.S. citizens in Israel during the midst of this war, and they wanted out of the country. On June 20th, flights from Israel with American passengers arrived in Tampa, Florida. Here's a clip of what Ron DeSantis had to say.
We're here at Tampa International Airport to really celebrate the return home of many of our fellow Floridians and fellow Americans from a very difficult situation over in Israel. And this is not the first time that the state of Florida has led rescues in situations like this, but I will say, given what's happening over there, given that you have a barrage of missiles being launched by a very hostile regime into Israel, given that the airport's totally shut down, given that the neighboring areas aren't exactly easy to navigate. This was probably the most challenging and logistically difficult mission that the Florida Department of Emergency Management has done, certainly in my time, and I don't think there's been anything like it, but we've already been able to help effectuate over 1,500 people's exit from Israel. Those folks will end up going in a variety of places. We, of course, are bringing in plane loads of people. This flight that came in from Cyprus was, I think, was about 160-some people. Yes, sir. That came in.
The next day, while the U.S. was still anticipating whether or not we'd strike Iran, what happens that night in a presidential address shocks the U.S.
A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime: Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan.
The United States striking Iran's nuclear facilities, providing offensive assistance for Israel in its war with Iran. President Trump addressing the nation from the White House directly after the strikes.
Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu expressing gratitude.
Congratulations, President Trump. Your bold decision to target Iran's nuclear facilities with the awesome and righteous might of the United States will change history.
The U.S. alone had the 30,000-pound bunker buster needed to destroy Iran's nuclear sites buried deep underground. President Trump didn't mention whether that was used in this attack, but did say that B-2 stealth bombers, which are capable of carrying bunker busters, were involved.
This cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days. But if peace does not come quickly, we will go after those other targets with precision, speed, and skill.
On Friday, Iran's foreign minister warning the U.S. getting involved would be very dangerous for everybody. Now, all eyes are on Iran and how they will respond. I'm Kayla Gaskins reporting.
Here's a timeline broken down by Jan Jeffcoat on how the U.S. carried out Operation Midnight Hammer.
Thanks for joining us. You are watching the National News Desk, America's News Now. I'm Jan Jeffcoat. It is Monday, June 23rd, and right now the world waiting for Iran's next move. World leaders urging peace for the regime to come to the negotiating table. President Trump warning any retaliation on U.S. targets means a greater attack from America's armed forces. That successful and highly complex attack on Tehran's nuclear facilities, the largest B-2 operational strike in U.S. history. It all unfolded just after midnight Eastern Saturday when 7 B-2 stealth bombers took off from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, heading east toward Iran with decoys that headed west. After 17 hours of flying, or around 5 p.m. Eastern, the B-2s linked up with fighter aircraft that escorted the bombers into Iran. Then at 6:40 p.m. Eastern, the B-2 struck the Fordow nuclear facility with several bunker buster bombs as Tomahawk missiles launched from U.S. submarines hit another nuclear facility. The B-2 bombers left Iranian airspace just 50 minutes later to begin their flight back to the U.S. President Trump addressed the nation shortly after with this message to America.
We love you, God, and we love our great military. Protect them. God bless the Middle East, God bless Israel, and God bless America.
In the aftermath, Trump said Iran's nuclear sites were totally obliterated. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth calls this operation a success, and they're sure that they've taken out Iran's nuclear program.
The battle damage assessment is ongoing, but our initial assessment, as the chairman said, is that all of our precision munitions struck where we wanted them to strike and had the desired effect. Which means especially in Fordow, which was the primary target here, we believe we achieved destruction of capabilities there. Ultimately, wherever it may be, whether it's in Iraq or Syria or bases in the Gulf, as the president said, it would be, as the chairman said, it would be a very bad idea for Iran or its proxies to attempt to attack American forces.
But Trump made this decision to strike Iran without giving Congress a heads up. Atra El-Nashar reports how this move leaves GOP and Democratic members divided, with a lot of them caught off guard.
The Truth Social post heard round the world. President Trump announcing the U.S. bombed 3 of Iran's nuclear sites caught many in Congress by surprise. The bulk of the president's political allies applauding the move, which was done without authorization from Congress.
There's no doubt that because of the president's decisive action, we have severely damaged Iran's critical nuclear infrastructure.
House Speaker Mike Johnson, the president made the right call and did what he needed to do. Two Democrats breaking from their party to voice support for the strikes, New Jersey Congressman Josh Gottheimer and Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, who says this was the correct move by POTUS. Iran is the world's leading sponsor of terrorism and cannot have nuclear capabilities. A few in the GOP breaking from the president.
The Constitution requires Congress to weigh in on this. This was a bad move politically, but it's also just a bad move legally and constitutionally and policy-wise.
The president issuing this lengthy criticism of Massey, saying MAGA doesn't want him, doesn't know him, and doesn't respect him. Republican Ohio Congressman Warren Davidson reacting to the news Saturday, while President Trump's decision may prove just, it's hard to conceive a rationale that's constitutional. Even Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, she writes, every time America is on the verge of greatness, we get involved in another foreign war. And this is not our fight. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer publicly urging Majority Leader John Thune to immediately bring a war powers resolution up for a vote. A bipartisan effort is also underway in the House. Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is among a handful in her party who say ordering a strike is absolutely and clearly grounds for impeachment. With Democrats in the minority in both the House and Senate, any impeachment effort is certain to fail. Democratic leaders, including top members of the House and Senate Intelligence Committees, are also appalled that the administration only alerted Republican lawmakers before the strikes. On Tuesday, the CIA and other intelligence officials will brief members of Congress, and the Senate Intel Committee will gather for a closed meeting. On Capitol Hill, I'm Atra El-Nashar.
Following the strike, Israel claims Iran's uranium stockpile was moved just days before the U.S. struck. And President Trump, he questioned a regime change in Iran.
Damage assessments of Iran's nuclear facilities still underway as questions remain over the location of Tehran's stockpile of enriched uranium. Satellite images released by Maxar Technologies taken days before Saturday's strikes show 16 cargo trucks positioned near the Fordow enrichment plant. Israel says it has evidence that Iran had moved equipment and roughly 880 pounds of uranium from the facility in recent days. That's enough near weapons grade material for around 10 nuclear weapons.
Yeah, John, we're going to work in the coming weeks to ensure that we do something with that fuel, and that's one of the things that we're going to have conversations with the Iranians about. But what we know, John, is they no longer have the capacity to turn that stockpile of highly enriched uranium to weapons-grade uranium, and that was really the goal here.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu revealed overnight that the IDF has interesting intel on the whereabouts of Iran's uranium stockpile, but did not provide any more details. Although the purpose of the attacks was to destroy Iran's nuclear capabilities, the president did float the idea of a regime change in Iran. National News Desk's Matt Galka live on Capitol Hill with the latest for us. Matt?
Well, Jen, good morning. The president put the idea out there on Truth Social, writing in part, "It's not politically correct to use the term regime change, but if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be a regime change?" Now, up to this point, top officials in the administration had said the strike wasn't about that change, only dismantling Iran's nuclear program. That included the Vice President, J.D. Vance, who had said over the weekend that regime change was not the goal. But Secretary of State Marco Rubio did leave the door open if the country continues to pursue a nuclear weapon.
Look, at the end of the day, if Iran is committed to becoming a nuclear weapons power, I do think it puts the regime at risk. I really do. I think it would be the end of the regime if they tried to do that.
Now, there is already some support for the idea, especially with some more hawkish members of Congress, including South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, who wrote in part, "Who in their right mind would want this regime to continue the status quo, attacking their neighbors, oppressing their people, and being the largest state sponsor of terrorism on the planet?" Reporting in Washington, I'm Matt Galka for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
Now, while there's all this speculation about what the president meant by his post, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt clarifies what the president meant.
The president's posture and our military posture has not changed. The president was just simply raising a question that I think many people around the world are asking. If the Iranian regime refuses to give up their nuclear program or engage in talks, we just took out their nuclear program on Saturday night, as you all know. But if they refuse to engage in diplomacy moving forward, why shouldn't the Iranian people rise up against this brutal terrorist regime? That's a question the president raised last night. But as far as our military posture, it hasn't changed.
Now, 2 days later, after the U.S. struck Iran on June 23rd, Iran launched missiles at a U.S. airbase in Qatar. Here's how it all unfolded.
President Trump calling Iran's foiled attempt to strike Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar a very weak response to the U.S. strikes on 3 Iranian nuclear sites. The president also making clear he expects this to be the end of the violence, not only between the United States and Iran, but throughout the region. In a Truth Social post Monday afternoon, the president says, "I am pleased to report that no Americans were harmed and hardly any damage was done. Most importantly, they've gotten it all out of their system, and there will hopefully be no further hate. I want to thank Iran for giving us early notice, which made it possible for no lives to be lost and nobody to be injured. Perhaps Iran can now proceed to peace and harmony in the region, and I will enthusiastically encourage Israel to do the same." Qatari officials confirmed to media outlets Iran gave them a general warning that American bases could be attacked. Immediately after the strikes, Iran made it a point to say the number of missiles they used was equal to the amount of bombs the U.S. dropped on its nuclear sites. This is widely being interpreted as a symbolic move, a sign that Iran may be ready to de-escalate hostilities with the United States.
What we are seeing is calculation on behalf of the Iranians to say, okay, we've responded to the United States attack from this past weekend. Now we need to look for the off-ramp where we can work our way to the negotiating table.
There are some 40,000 American troops stationed throughout the Middle East. Bases across the region have been preparing for an escalation in hostilities and potentially incoming fire. Meanwhile, there are still questions about how effective the U.S. strikes on Iran's nuclear sites were. More time is required for definitive answers, but President Trump, despite more cautious remarks from others in his administration, insists Iran's nuclear program was obliterated. President Trump was with his national security team as the early information about these Iranian strikes was starting to come out. And Tuesday morning, he's set to depart for The Hague, where he'll join a NATO summit, and allies there are certain to encourage de-escalation. At the White House, I'm Atra al-Nashar.
During all of that chaos, on the same exact day, President Trump announced that a ceasefire agreement had been reached between Israel and Iran after 12 days of war.
President Trump declaring on Truth Social that a ceasefire agreement between Iran and Israel has been reached, hours after Iran followed through on a retaliatory strike on a U.S. military base in Qatar, which resulted in no casualties. According to Reuters, it was the Qatari prime minister who got Iran to agree to this U.S. proposal. President Trump says the plan is Iran and Israel will complete their operations, their planned strikes, then Iran will start the ceasefire, followed by Israel. And by 6 p.m. Eastern Tuesday, the war will be considered officially over. The president says, on the assumption that everything works as it should, which it will, I would like to congratulate both countries, Israel and Iran, on having the stamina, courage, and intelligence to end what should be called the 12-day war. This is a war that could have gone on for years and destroyed the entire Middle East, but it didn't and never will. God bless Israel, God bless Iran, God bless the Middle East, God bless the United States of America, and God bless the world. The announcement came after Iran's foiled attempt to strike a U.S. airbase in Qatar.
After all of that work on behalf of the U.S. trying to serve as a peacemaker, it didn't last long. Israel and Iran still traded attacks despite accepting the ceasefire. Trump's frustration bubbled up on the White House lawn while talking to reporters. Watch this clip.
Iran violated the peace agreement and the ceasefire agreement. Do you believe that Iran is still committed to peace?
Yeah, I do. They violated it, but Israel violated it too. Israel, as soon as we made the deal, they came out and they dropped a load of bombs, the likes of which I've never seen before. The biggest load that we've seen. I'm not happy with Israel. You know, when I say, okay, now you have 12 hours, you don't go out in the first hour and just drop everything you have on them. So I'm not happy with them. I'm not happy with Iran either. But I'm really unhappy if Israel's going out this morning because of one rocket that didn't land, that was shot, perhaps by mistake, that didn't land. I'm not happy about that. You know what? We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing. Do you understand that?
Multiple reports were also claiming that the U.S.'s airstrikes did no damage to Iran's nuclear facility. But the White House was quick to shut the claim down at a NATO summit in the Netherlands.
President Trump in a war of words over how effective U.S. strikes were in taking out Iran's underground nuclear facilities.
The site is obliterated, and we think everything nuclear is down there. They didn't take it out.
Information in an early report by the Pentagon's intelligence arm was leaked to several media outlets, saying the U.S. strikes did not entirely destroy Iran's nuclear facilities and only set the country's nuclear program back by a matter of months, contradicting recent claims by the president and top administration officials. The president and his defense secretary do acknowledge the report exists.
When you actually look at the report, by the way, it was a top secret report, it was preliminary, it was low confidence. All right, so this isn't, you make assessments based on what you know.
They said it could be very devastating, very serious.
Moderate to severe, and we believe far more likely severe and obliterated.
A select few members of Congress have been briefed on the report, including Democratic House Intelligence Committee member Jason Crow. Without revealing classified information, he suggests Iran's facilities may have been built like America's Cold War-era Cheyenne Mountain complex.
Over 60 years ago, we built a nuclear-proof facility. Do you think that technology exists today? Do you think people can still do that? Of course they can.
These before and after satellite pictures show, at the surface, damage inflicted by America's bunker buster bombs and Tomahawk missiles. The White House leaning on statements from Israeli officials saying the strikes set Iran's nuclear program back by years. Iran only revealing this.
Yes, our nuclear installations have been badly damaged. That's for sure.
Complicating attempts to get a full assessment of the state of Iran's nuclear program. On Wednesday, Iran's parliament advanced a bill to suspend cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency, which had been trying to resume inspections of Iran's nuclear sites. In Washington, I'm Atra El-Bashar.
Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth even held a special conference on this, calling it fake news over the failures of the strikes.
Because you, and I mean specifically you, the press, specifically you, the press corps, because you cheer against Trump so hard, it's like in your DNA and in your blood to cheer against Trump, because you want him not to be successful so bad, you have to cheer against the efficacy of these strikes. You have to hope maybe they weren't effective. Maybe the way the Trump administration has represented them isn't true. So let's take half-truths, spun information, leaked information, and then spin it. Spin it in every way we can to try to cause doubt and manipulate the public mind over whether or not our brave pilots were successful. How many stories have been written about how hard it is to, I don't know, fly a plane for 36 hours? Has MSNBC done that story? Has Fox? Have we done the story how hard that is? Have we done it 2 or 3 times so that American people understand? How about how difficult it is to shoot a drone from an F-15 or 16 or F-22 or F-35? Or what it's like to man a Patriot battery? Or how hard it is to refuel midair? Giving the American people an understanding of how complex and sophisticated this mission really was. There are so many aspects of what our brave men and women did that because of the hatred of this press corps are undermined because your people are trying to leak and spin that it wasn't successful. It's irresponsible. And folks in this room are privy to that information because of the proximity here in the Pentagon. It's an important responsibility. And time again, classified information is leaked or peddled for political purposes to try to make the president look bad. And what's really happening is you're undermining the success of incredible B-2 pilots and incredible F-35 pilots and incredible refuelers and incredible air defenders who accomplished their mission, set back a nuclear program in ways that other presidents would have dreamed. How about we celebrate that? How about we talk about how special America is, that only we have these capabilities? I think it's too much to ask, unfortunately, for the fake news. So we're used to that. But we also have an opportunity to stand at the podium and read the truth of what's really happening.
And the reality is you want to call it destroyed, you want to call it defeated, you want to call it obliterated. Choose your word. This was an historically successful attack, and we should celebrate it as Americans. And it gives us a chance to have peace, chance to have a deal, and an opportunity to prevent a nuclear Iran, which is something President Trump talked about for 20 years, and no other presidents had the courage to actually do.
The situation with Iran is going to definitely keep developing, so we'll keep you updated with all of the latest at thenationaldesk.com and on our social media platforms at The National Desk.